Welcome back to the Aromatic Mystery School. I'm Elizabeth Ashley, the Secret Healer. This is an Aromythology lecture about Demeter. Class 3 will be working with black pepper. So I thought that we would open with this particular slide because this is an actual votive offering that was found at Eleusis of Demeter. And something very close to my heart is to get people and my students to understand that over time we have been kind of brainwashed to think that there is a white superiority, a white civilization because of the beautiful gleaming white statues from ancient Greece. But nowadays we're starting to understand that what's happened is over time the painters worn off, and actually they were very bright garish colours, and this one's lovely because we can see the blue of her mantle. Interestingly, she's got red hair, lovely red lips, and as you can see she's hollow at the back. Presumably she had a candle in, but we don't know. But this was found near the altar, and this is actually from Eleusis. Tell you adore this picture. I don't know if you've seen it circulating. I just think it's smashing. This lovely little rodent is doing his own aromatherapy. He's sniffing and really helping his nervous system. And hopefully by now you've been able to watch the video that talks about olfaction and the benefits of smelling essential oils. And then we went into the beehive, didn't we? And we heard the voice of the beehive, and we examined our feelings about abundance, and we learnt how to move into the liminal place, the place where the priestess operates from, the place of betwixt and between, where we are neither one thing nor the other, and simultaneously both. We've also used Palmarosa to move boundaries. We used it to learn and fine tune and to find a way back to the Demeter archetype in our personalities, that mothering archetype, that part that is interested in nurturing, whether it be a person or a project or child, but also the part that really gets very upset if that ability to have that out pouring of nurturing, if that outlet is taken away, we'll see both depression but also rage and anger. And of course, then we have the way that Demeter pulls the strings to manipulate. And we've also worked with lemongrass to say, what if? All of these things may be true of the reasons why I can't do such and such, but what if I could find a way to do it? And we examine how large a part of our psyche we give away to people. Because of the boundaries that they put up, the obstacles that they put up, and the way that we nurture people and we want to care for them and we want to do things for them, and that takes away that space that we could be using for endeavours for ourselves. So giving away one's power, this is a big part of the Demeter archetype, and an interesting part when there is no longer that outlet. So perhaps the child is going to university, or perhaps, God forbid, they died, or the woman can't get pregnant, or they were doing a job that they absolutely loved and they had an ability to really care for people. But then suddenly that job's taken away, they're made redundant, it's made obsolete. In England, most likely the funding was drawn. And we can imagine these bees on the left, we can imagine them to be nurse bees. They're bees that are early in the hive. They live for about 6 weeks in total, a summertime bee. Wintertime bees live longer. But a summertime bee is around about 42 to 45 days old. By the time you see them out in the garden, they're about 3 weeks old, but they've already done a lot of work within the hive. And we've got a set who I like to call the Charites, the Graces, who were Aphrodite's handmaidens, and their job is to surround the queen bee and feed her with royal jelly. But also, we have these nurse bees who go around and make sure that all of the nymphs or the little wormy bees that haven't quite hatched yet have enough bee bread to feed them. And so their job is to take care of the nursery with pollen and honey. And of course, there is a very big mythical archetype of how the bee is favoured because she labours. But in the 4th century, St. John Chrysostom said, no, the bee is not favoured because she labours. It's because she labours for others. And that comes at a price. So Demeter has this way of backdoor dealing and holding people to account. And I can't remember if I've said this before, so I'm going to go back. There is, you can quite often see when you're talking to people about their sort of archetypes, how we've got these like teenage mums who have this overwhelming desire to be a new mum. Not really interested in ever having a job. You know, the Demeter drive is really, really strong in them. And it's almost like Demeter makes them forget to take their pill or gives them diarrhea so the pill doesn't work. And they may not deliberately have got themselves pregnant, and yet they seem to wish themselves into this happening. So we have this way of Demeter kind of working through the back door, but also she's very good at making people feel guilty. And this is the dark side of the Demeter archetype. And I think I've said it in other videos. This is something that is really strong in my personality. Perhaps it's because I'm a Cancerian, but and a mother of three, and have been a mother for 30 years. There's a 16 years between my first and my third child. So I have been kind of pregnant a lot of times. And yeah, I love being a mom, but I also really expect my children to appreciate how good a mom I am. And sometimes that can really, I'm sure, become very annoying to them. And I always think about Christmas. This is it really makes me laugh because this is a really good example of this. My daughter loves to come home for Christmas, and she loves to have Christmas her way. And frankly, our house is not big enough for all the things that she wants to do. We've got too many aquariums in the living room to have big Christmas trees. We don't have a dining room, so we have to build a dining table in the living room. There's the dogs, her dog and my dog fight, and the whole thing is really, really stressful. And it's January now, and even thinking about it, I'm thinking, oh God, I don't want to do Christmas. And my whole year will be geared around, please don't make me do Christmas. But if she turned round and said, I'm not coming to Christmas this year, I would be so angry. And this is a really good example of how the Demeter archetype plays out. It's like, I There's a cost, and I am a martyr for being a mother. I am a martyr for wanting to do the really big dinner. I mean, I'll always say, I'm not doing Christmas this year. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing all the cooking. And then come October, I'm starting to steam the Christmas puddings. I'm starting to put things in the freezer because that's my personality. I am a feeder. But I don't do it really open with open generosity. Yes, everybody has to appreciate it and audibly appreciate it, and that is very much a Demeter kind of backdoor kind of thing. And this is an extension of it, really. That Demeter wants her children to be dependent on her, but that dependency is two ways. And so, what's very difficult is when the daughter, when Persephone will say, but of course it could be a son, wants to go away and do something different. Mum doesn't like that. Demeter is very much, but when are you coming back? What are you going to do? I'm going to sit here and wait for you. I'm going to sob, and I'm going to get very angry, and I'm going to be sulky, and I'm going to become depressed because you're not coming back. And when you start to watch for this, particularly, what's interesting is I discovered this work when my children had gone away to university, and it was not acute with me because, as I say, there's such a gap between my second and my third. They were going away to university, but I had a new baby, and so I had still got that outlet, but I'd got some friends who dealt with it very, very well. I still cried that she'd gone, for a month. I cried. I found it very, very difficult. It was, I felt like my heart had been ripped out with her going, and that was the Demeter aspect. And while we cannot do anything about that, and because in a way, why would we want to? Why would we want to do anything about loving our children so much? There's got to be a way to nourish the hole that's left and to be able to open that space for other archetypes to come through. So, for example, maybe one decides, well, I'd really quite like to have a lover now that I haven't got children running around the house. Well, okay, so we find ways for the Aphrodite archetype to come through. Or I'm really interested in going back to university or writing a book, which is obviously what I started to do. So we need to make space for the Athena archetype. And Athena and Demeter actually ritually they work together a lot. There's a relationship between the priestess of Athena Polias and a relationship between them, and they say one hands the baton over to the other before the mysteries. The two don't work together, they work at different times. So being able to kind of identify, this is where this hole comes from. How am I going to do something about this hole? And often we'll talk about how other people put things in the way of us. Other people expect. I'm now getting to the age where my mothers. I have two mothers, a real mum and a stepmom, and both of them are quite infirm. And then I also have the children, and I have a husband who's been quite ill. So I have a lot of commitments to do that. But also, when those children went, I could still keep imagining those commitments were there. But in a way, I have to like mentally make a space to allow these archetypes come through. And black pepper is absolutely fantastic for that. It's about saying, well, look back at your own path, not just what everybody else wants. You have a path, and how are you going to walk along that path without letting everybody else down? Possession and control, really, that's an extension of the same thing. That it's almost like we are trying to control our children, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a child. Remember, for me, it's easy for me to talk that way because I know that I do it. But controlling a business, not allowing somebody else to take the reins, micromanaging, when perhaps you could take a bit of a back seat to let go. You've established what you want to do, and there's chance to be able to do that. And it's almost acting like the child or the business is your possession and that nobody else has a right to it. And so, in its worst case, in its really most extreme situation, think how difficult that is for a new partner coming in, for, the daughter gets a new boyfriend, she gets married. But mom's really overwhelming, mommy's really controlling, and that doesn't make a very good start for their marriage. So it's really healthy work, this is, to examine, because there's nothing bad about being a great mom. There isn't. But I'm not sure that it's always very balanced. And sometimes it's very good to look and go, is this healthy? Is it helpful to Persephone? Is it helpful to me? Is it helpful to my husband? If the attention's always on the children, what else is there? And like I say, it could also be obsessed by one's work. And I think we've done that to death. Passive aggressive traits don't come then. Fine, fine, it's all right. I didn't want you to come anyway. Yeah, I do that so much. And alignment with the physicality of the Melissa essential oil. I didn't even remember what I meant by this. I had to go and look it up. And what I mean is greedy. You're greedy with what you're doing. You're greedy with your children's attention. You're greedy with time. Use much more than you should. And of course, greed, diabetes, digestion issues, that obesity. Those are things that Melissa Essential Oil deals with, which you can find if you look in my Melissa book, if you didn't know that. Yes, and all or nothing to make change. I think this is really fascinating. I think one of the most interesting things, if you do go on to read the book by Jean Shinoda Bolen, which I really do recommend that you do, Goddess is in Everyone. What she recommends is when you identify somebody with a particular strong goddess trait, watch what they do and learn from them. And was absolutely eye-opening for me, because I am the kind of person that goes, I'm not happy with this, so either it changes or I'm just smashing it up. I'm not a compromiser. It has to be the way I want, and I do blow things up. And this, again, is the Demeter archetype. Now, the Artemis archetype would go and shoot somebody, frankly. The Hera archetype would do something behind somebody's back and manipulate to get her own way. She would probably get her husband involved in sorting things out. The Athena archetype is very, very good at kind of going very quiet, thinking it out, just letting it rise above. So this is very interesting to watch. If you manage to identify somebody with a different archetype, that they are an extremely good lover, for example, and they exude all that beauty and they wear all the right makeup and the jewelry and all of that stuff, how do they deal with these kind of situations with the children? How do they deal with being angry? Because it's a different goddess that's dealing with it. It's not Demeter that's dealing with it. Aphrodite is dealing with it. The girl that's in the library, or the professor that has never had any children, that she's always involved in books, she still gets angry, but she deals with it in a different way. She does not blow it up like Demeter does. It's very interesting to watch. And yeah, just the ability to watch what you're doing, to start to go, oh, yeah, I did do that. I did do that, and try not to be in denial of the goddess, because the goddess does not like to be ignored. And the more that you try to deny that she's pulling strings, I promise you, she gets worse. So once you bring her out into the light, she behaves a bit better, because you start to look at yourself and go, ah, I like that part of me. I don't really like that part. We're always looking at polarities. One of the things that you learn to do when you're a bee priestess is to walk the figure of eight. The walk, the waggle dance of the bee. You're walking the infinity sign, right? And you have, how you do that is you put two rocks on the floor. There's more to it, but this is the mechanics of it. You put two rocks on the floor, one polarity, the other polarity. So the first one that you ever do is joy and sadness, and you walk between them. So as you go around the left one, for example, that's joy. It comes round, go through the right one, that's sadness. And as you walk, you start to realize many things about joy and sadness. But you realize that actually they are joined, that the polarities are part of each other. And of course, that is what the yin yang sign says. So if you've got like the swirl on one side, if you have a look, there's like a little circle of the other color. So black swirl with a white circle in, white swirl with a black circle in. That's the polarities in both. So you will always embody, to a greater and lesser degree, good stuff and bad stuff of Demeter. And likewise, we all have these archetypes in our psychology, just some are stronger than others. And being able to start to identify who it is that is pulling your strings, making the bad stuff happen, also helps you to start to identify, this is how I can work with this goddess to be better in this situation. She knows how to do it, because she, frankly, has walked the walk somewhat over the many, many millennia. And so there is a requirement to shine a mirror on these different parts of your personality. So Demeter is a bee goddess. Um, this is another a goddess. This is Artemis of Ephesus, covered in lots of different things. Maybe they are bee eggs, maybe they are gourds. We don't really know what those strange things are. Maybe they're breasts, we don't know. What we do know is round her neck, she carries a zodiac. And you may notice that right at the middle of it is Cancer. And of course, Cancer is the mothering archetype. So I want you to talk a little bit about what I call the attraction and repulsion of Cancerian gunk. And I got this from a very good astrologer called Amber Khan. And she does a presentation called The Quietist Revolution. If you're interested in astrology, and she does it with tarot cards. She's very, very good. And she is incredibly beautiful. I mean, breathtakingly beautiful, mesmerically so, but also Cancerian rising. So she feels that she can talk as she likes about the Cancerian bad stuff, because she's familiar. I can talk even more familiar about it, because it's my sun sign. Cancerians are very caring people. We're also extremely moody people. Notice the familiarity with the Demeter archetype. We are exceedingly good listeners. I am more than happy to listen I could listen for a living. The only thing is, many of you who were listening to this now will be familiar with me saying, you can say whatever you like to me, because I will forget. It's become a part of my personality to not remember conversations, which is probably quite healthy when I take on so many. But what happens is the people that do speak to you do not forget. They remember very clearly that they have told you the dark side of the moon. They will go very, very deep because nobody's challenging them. I'm just listening and I'm accepting, non-judgmentally. I don't necessarily rate myself as being any better than anybody else, but I am a good listener and people do talk to me. So this happens to me a lot. Sometimes, if they're very angry or they say things that they are embarrassed about or they have opened up more than they are happy with, they'll avoid me afterwards. They'll be ashamed of what they've said. They will feel very embarrassed about it and embarrassed that they've shown their vulnerability. Now, like I say, I've forgotten. But that's not necessarily the case. But Cancerians don't care. They're more than happy to be like rolling in the raves with any kind of strange, dark emotions. But what happens is people go, oh no, I'm really embarrassed about what I said. Shouldn't have shown her that side. Shouldn't have been that vulnerable. So that means that either you have a few really good friends who are quite comfortable with being grown up about emotions, but the others run a mile. So again, you don't have that many friends. So that gives even more space to be focused on your children, on everything else. So that is something to be aware of, I think, with this Demeter archetype, that if you find that you are isolated and you're not keeping friends very well, it might be because you're being too good a friend and embarrassing them. As I say, that was Amber Khan's take on it, and I was like, whoa, I absolutely identify with that. So I thought that was quite interesting. So I also wanted to talk about this, which I thought was really interesting. Um, I will have to kind of scroll back for those of you who are not aromatherapists and tell you what the beta caryophyllene is, a constituent in the oil that we're working with, which is black pepper. And I wanted to tell you this really cool story. It doesn't really tell you a great deal about the Demeter archetype. I just thought it was really interesting to do. And this really shows how remarkable nature is. And remember that she is the goddess of the harvest, and we're talking about harvest here. We're particularly talking about harvest of sweet corn, and she's goddess of corn, slightly different, but sweet corn. And this trial that I'm going to tell you about was done because sweet corn harvests can often fail. And that is because these tiny little weevils have gone under the ground into the soil and eaten all of the roots of the sweet corn. And so therefore it's got nothing to nourish it and it fails. So what the corn does is it tolerates it for a while, but then it goes, had enough of this, manufactures beta caryophyllene, remember that's the constituent we're interested in the black pepper, manufactures beta caryophyllene to call in a predatory little insect that then comes along, eats all the weevils, isn't really interested in its root, and so protects the roots of the sweet corn so that she can flourish. So I thought that was really interesting. So I want to tell you a little bit more about beta caryophyllene because I think it's fascinating to think about it. So it's what's called a weak agonist of the CB2 receptor. The CB2 receptor belongs to a part of our endocrine system, specifically our endocannabinoid system, which is our primary endocrine system that modulates how hormones are passed forward between the body. And there's two kinds of receptors, actually there's more, but the two main ones in the endocannabinoid system are CB1. It means cannabinoid receptor because it interacts with cannabis as well, and CB2. We won't get interested in CB1, that's a whole different lecture, but CB2 receptor is to do with pain, inflammation, and immunity. Now, sorry, Venus. So there was a really fascinating trial where they wanted to see how effective it would be to breathe in beta caryophyllene, which you're going to be doing, don't forget, when you're doing this work with black pepper. If you breathe in beta caryophyllene, what happens? Okay, so this, I will tell you, this trial is about obese mice, so fat birds. Bless her, bless Venus. So the mice were exposed to volatile beta caryophyllene, so they breathed it in, they breathed it in, and afterwards they were sacrificed. Bless them. But they could detect that the beta caryophyllene had gone to the lungs, to the olfactory bulb, to the brain. It was in the blood serum, the heart, the liver, the kidney, in epidermal fat and brown adipose tissue. Venus has much. It's the stuff that keeps you warm around your belly. So that beta caryophyllene had actually gone into the fat, right? Then, 24 hours later, they were still able to detect it in the brain, in the liver, and the brown adipose tissue. So, a whole day after you have been inhaling your beta caryophyllene, then your body, your liver in particular, is still going to be working to metabolize fat. I mean, how interesting is that? The metabolites were related to glutathione metabolism, and they were significantly altered in the liver. So that's to do with diabetes. Just inhaling. I mean, that's so interesting to me. So it says it's speculated that volatile beta caryophyllene is incorporated into the organs of mice via microvessels in the lungs. But detection of beta caryophyllene in the brain is of particular interest. In general, only a limited number of functional food factors can be distributed across to the brain because they don't cross a blood-brain barrier, so it's unusual. And that's what I've written. So because the blood-brain barrier limits transfer of substances from the blood into the brain. So our results indicate the possibility that inhaled volatile beta caryophyllene may be distributed into the brain via blood circulation. So not just the inhalation, but even breathing it in through the lungs, it's going to get there. Further, Kumar et al. Reported the possibility of the distribution of nasally administered pharmaceuticals to both the cerebrospinal fluid and to the blood, and therefore, in addition to the lung pathway, direct distribution via the nasal cavity must also be considered as a potential distribution pathway to the brain. To them, I'm sure that was revolutionary. To us, it's obvious, but it's really fascinating to see, and just to reiterate how useful this is. And remember, we're talking about the problems like diabetes, like obesity, that are connected to the Demeter archetype. She's to do with the cereal harvest, keto. That's the whole thing, isn't it? Get rid of all the carbs, all the fat around the waist, the abundance, the nurturing, the too much richness. Actually, her sacred sort of symbol for Demeter is a cornucopia, the basket that's absolutely overflowing with food, and in particular cereal and grain harvest. So when we're thinking about that harvest, we're thinking about abundance. We're also thinking about strengths, the things that we do really well and that we've got a lot of them. We're also thinking about the seed harvest, but also our weaknesses. So I really love this picture of her. Hasn't she got lovely hair? I would love to have hair that did that. But I like this because she is extending her hand to you and to the earth. And this is now your trigger to use your black pepper and for us to go on the next journey. Look at the hair, the hair. I had to show you. Look at that. That's I don't know if that's the size of her. I think that's Livia. But look how beautiful it is. How plaited and scrolled. I couldn't do that now with all the technology we've got. Isn't it fantastic? So the next part you will be doing is to do some work with Demeter's still and black pepper.